Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is the Institute Saga in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 11, Future Plans. And now, the main story, the double wedding of the century. The anchorwoman said with a wide smile. America's greatest superhero, Clark Kent, married Raven Darkholme, while the superhero/scientist Reed Richards married Susan Storm at the same ceremony yesterday at the Xavier Institute at Bayville, despite a first contact scenario. We now go to Matt Hicksville at the Xavier Institute. Matt. Thank you, Debbie. Matt smiled, his elegantly coiffed hair barely moving in the breeze as he grinned at the camera. Yesterday was a truly amazing day, with over 50 Kryptonians arriving in our solar system. Even as we speak, they are preparing to make Venus into a habitable planet so that they can rebuild their former civilization. Their leader, General Zod, the uncle of Lord Zod, who is part of the Asgardian group known as the Warriors 4, released a statement expressing his gratitude towards Earth for not condemning his people to wander the stars, and confirming once again that although his people will remain apart from all political maneuvering on Earth, they will provide aid without reservation should we suffer from a natural disaster such as an earthquake, tsunami, or volcanic eruption. We are honored to have with us today Lieutenant Az Lan, who has agreed to grant us an interview. Good morning, Lieutenant. ## good morning. I'm sorry, I meant good morning. Az Lan replied. Please, for our viewers, tell us something about yourself. Az Lan paused, his expression midway between confused and panicked. I currently have no idea what to say. Sorry. First time in front of a planetary audience? Matt asked, and the Kryptonian nodded. Perfectly understandable. Perhaps you could tell us about what Krypton was like. It was beautiful. Our cities soared to the sky and the wildernesses were preserved. Az Lan began. Interesting. Doom said as he leaned back in his throne, his children sitting on comfortable armchairs either side of him. I had feared that my future schemes would have to include ways to counter Zod and his people. Being responsible for the extinction of an entire race is not something that sits easy on me. I am glad that I do not need to do so. Charles felt their planet die. Magneto commented from his smaller throne, which he had carefully altered so that he was only slightly below Doom's level rather than significantly lower. It was many years ago, back when he and I were still working together. Until Kent was publicly revealed to be Superman, I hadn't realized that he was from that race. I still wonder what I could have done had I convinced him to come to me, rather than join with Charles. Clark Kent is the ultimate contradiction. Doom mused. He lives as much like a human as he can, moral and caring, until everyone around him believes that he is human, then he flies into the sky and strikes down his enemies in ways that could lead people to think him a god. Should it ever occur to him to think of himself that way? Magneto nodded. He is doing a great deal to protect mutant kind, in his own way. Perhaps I need to rethink some of my plans. But your aims remain the same. Mutants are the future of humanity. Magneto shrugged, then he paused as Pietro appeared in his characteristic silver blur. Dad, Galatea's getting out of control again. The wall exploded outwards and the figure who had been used as an impromptu cannonball tried to get up, only to fall flat. Galatea, what has set you off this time? Magneto asked in a disappointed tone as he landed in front of the enraged woman. You, bastard! She screamed, and the sonic blast sent Pietro flying backwards. Magneto just raised an eyebrow as the magnetic shield he was using to protect himself rippled. She found the chamber. Tecmage groaned as he staggered out through the shattered wall. Our planned reinforcements are gone, as is the equipment. Magneto's eyes narrowed and he thrust out his fist, opening his hand slightly. With a scream of agony, Galatea collapsed onto the ground, writhing in agony. You were going to be my right hand, the leader of my legion, Galatea. Magneto growled over the writhing Kryptonian. Your army would have let me gain dominion over the world, and in a fit of childish pique, you destroyed it. Magneto curled his fingers back into a fist and Galatea went limp, gasping for breath. Chrome, place her in the healing chamber until she recovers. As you command, my lord. Chrome responded as he walked over. Picking up Galatea, he turned, only to pause. How well did she fight? She managed to fight her way past all of us, my lord. Chrome said, and Magneto nodded. Then she is still of some use to me. Good. As Chrome vanished back into the base, Pietro stood up and briefly rubbed at his head. How did you do that? Quite simple. Magneto smirked. Inside our clone is a small lump of kryptonite encased in a container made of adamantium, blocking all of the radiation. All I did was adjust the container to let the radiation through. A few more times and she may finally learn her proper place as my weapon. Pietro whistled, then froze, glancing down at himself. She is the only one you've implanted things into, right, Dad? Dad? Hey, answer me. Dad. Galatea groaned as she opened her eyes, then she winced at the sight of Magneto glaring at her. I have invested a great deal of time, effort, and money into you, he stated. It is time that you began repaying my investment. If you do not, you shall be terminated and replaced with a new clone made from your Q&A. Do you understand? Galatea nodded slowly. Good. Magneto said as Frenzy appeared by his side, holding a white bundle in her hands. Here is your uniform. Put it on, then report to me. Turning, Magneto strode out of the medical bay and Galatea's gaze turned to Frenzy, who sneered at her. I still think he should have killed you for what you did. Frenzy stated as she dropped the pile of fabric on the table by Galatea's bed. Get washed and dressed. Pulling herself into a sitting position, Galatea reached out and lifted the top piece of fabric, unrolling it to reveal that it was a white top with Magneto's logo on the chest. Her gaze traveled to the lower part of the top, then she scrabbled amongst the rest of the fabric before sighing. A sleeved swimsuit and short red cape? They have to be kidding me. Pulling herself to her feet, she glared at the outfit before stalking into the bathroom. Magneto looked up as Galatea stalked into the hall, pulling on her gray gloves. Ah, Galatea, how nice of you to join us. I have a mission for you. Galatea glared at him, looking away as Magneto raised his fist slightly. Who do you want killed? There is a man named William Stryker. Magneto said, motioning for Chrome to hand a file over to Galatea. Accepting it, she started to leaf through it. I have received information that he is involved with a covert anti-mutant government initiative known as Operation Zero Tolerance, a movement which has absorbed Garden Creed's Sentinel Initiative. I want him killed as a warning, Galatea. Galatea nodded. So, who comes along to control me? No one, but be aware that you have a device implanted in you which will kill you if you do not return within 24 hours. Magneto stated, earning a fuming glance. I know that he is planning on taking a military plane to a secret base of his on an island just off the coast of Japan, a base that he reactivated a few months ago. Destroy the plane. I want it to crash into the ground, preferably at terminal velocity. Galatea nodded as she handed the folder back to Chrome, then accepted a small earpiece. You will rendezvous with Senyaka, who will have the flight path details. Galatea gave a brusque nod and Magneto smiled thinly. I would advise you to get going, Galatea. You have only a limited amount of time, after all. A growl was his only answer as Galatea turned, then blurred away so fast that Magneto had to use his powers to remain upright, braced against the sudden blast of air. Fuck, she's fast. Pietro breathed in awe. I wish I could be that fast. You may yet be. Magneto said. As Doom has proven that hybrid Kryptonian clones are possible, I have set my people a new task. Find a way to use the Q&A to enhance our powers. And what about those who came with Slot? Slot? Oh. You mean Zed? I still have more than enough kryptonite to deal with them. As Magneto spoke, a compartment on his belt opened, unleashing a green glow before it closed once again. Cool. Pietro smirked. Only a few months till you graduate. Alex Masters commented to his older brother. You going to become a full-time hero? That was my plan. Scott said as he glanced at the weather forecast, then accepted a plate of food. Pancakes. Alex paused to raise the volume slightly on the television before sitting down. You've noticed how the Roberto, Ray, and Evans are getting all the girls. Scott paused in cutting the pancakes to give Alex a curious look. Yes, why? Did you want to go public as well? Yeah, I would. Alex admitted, but if I do, that means they'd quickly work out that you are Cyclops and there's no way I'm gonna screw up the life of my big bro like that. Scott chuckled around his mouthful of pancake, then swallowed. How about on graduation day, you go public as Havoc to get the girls and I accept my diploma as Cyclops. That'll give you a full year of fangirls without you having to worry about me stealing any from you. Alex chuckled even as he squirted some strawberry syrup over his own pancake stack. Sounds like a plan, big bro. Sounds like a plan. What the? Alex's gaze snapped to the television as the newsreader spoke. And at this time, there is no clue as to the identity of the flying woman currently locked in combat with Flamebird above Tokyo. Flamebird, also known as Thuraya Var of Argo, is a recent member of the Henshin Rangers, having joined after being revived from stasis with the aid of Lady Eir of the Asgardian race, and is currently, she's down. Flamebird has just been knocked out of the sky and the unknown is heading for the plane. Holy shit. Alex whispered. Thura shook her head to try and dispel the dizziness, then she concentrated, turning her fall into a curve that led back into battle. Ahead of her, the white-clad villainess was blasting at the frantically evading plane with optic blasts and one engine was already engulfed in flames. I caught the newscast. Need help, little cousin? A familiar voice asked and Thura nodded. The bitch is mine, Lore, you save the plane. On it. Nightwing agreed as he adjusted his course. Thura narrowed her eyes and accelerated, throwing her fists out in front of her. Arg. Thura grinned as she slammed into her adversary from behind, then she grabbed the woman's belt and used it to anchor herself just long enough to deliver a powerful kick to the blonde's face. The resulting shockwave dislodged her grip and the two of them paused, Thura glaring while her enemy wiped away the blood from her nose. Galatea growled as the demmed ranger squared off against her again. The flying bitch was almost as fast and agile as she was. Then there was the second one, the man with the same chest symbol, who was even then putting out the engine fire on the escaping plane. Galatea. Magneto's voice echoed from her earpiece. Return to base. You are outnumbered and more are probably on their way. I can still do it. Galatea growled, then she gasped as a brief burst of pain hit her. It was not a suggestion. Magneto said. Return. Galatea glared at the bodysuited ranger for another long moment before she hurled herself high into the skies, rising almost to the edge of space even as she luxuriated in the sun's rays helping her body heal. Flamebird didn't waste any time trying to chase the unknown villainess, but instead somersaulted in midair, using the move to reorient herself and accelerate to where her cousin was trying to support the stricken plane. Pulling up beside him, she tapped him on his shoulder to get his attention. You take the front hard point, I'll take the back one. Lorzad nodded and briefly let go of the plane, almost seeming to teleport to near the front of the fuselage before the plane could do more than dip slightly. Thura moved to the rear and smirked as she saw the yellow square that marked the position of the hard point. Thanks, Kal. She laughed to herself as she placed her shoulders against the plane. This suggestion of yours really speeds up saving planes. If only you could see us now. Clark Kent stood on the balcony of the suite that he and Mystique were sharing, clad only in a fundashi. Mystique lounged against him, clad only in a wrapped towel and her hair still wet from the long soak in the onsen, as they watched the two Argosians fly high overhead, carefully supporting the damaged plane. You can't fool me, Boy Scout. Mystique said laughingly. Part of you wants to be out there, doing good and saving kittens from trees. True. Clark allowed as he wrapped his arm around Mystique's shoulders. But then I look at you and I remember that there are others who can take up the task, allowing me to do something far more important. Oh? Mystique asked with a querying eyebrow lifted. And what exactly is this more important task you remembered? Well, it begins with this. Clark smiled as he effortlessly lifted Mystique into his arms and kissed her deeply. After a long minute, their lips parted and Mystique sighed with pleasure. That is a good beginning. Well, since it was just a beginning, I guess I'll have to do better. Clark laughed as he carried his wife back into the bedroom. Chapter 12, Signs. Zod smirked as he looked out of the viewport. The upper hemisphere of Venus dominated the view, but the world engine was doing its job with incredible efficiency. Already, The once pearlescent planet-covering clouds of Venus had begun to clear as the giant atmospheric factories studding the sides of the world engine used tractor beams to pull in enormous quantities of the atmosphere, splitting and recombining them to create breathable air which were then expelled in volumes and pressures which would make the average hurricane look like a pale breeze. Secondary factories did the same at strategic points around the planet, although nowhere near as dramatically. Visible through the gaps in the once omnipresent clouds was the upper of the two main continents, or what would be continents once the convoy of ice asteroids arrived and were dropped through the atmosphere in order to create the oceans. To Zed's amusement, the names that the humans had given them, Ishtar and Aphrodite, were quite similar to two of Ra's champions, Istaro and Aphrodita, the champions of defensive warfare and loyal supportiveness respectively. ### sir ## Feyre said, appearing by his side with the solar-empowered sudden quickness that they had almost adjusted to. ##Tilbora reports that the magma convection currents have finally stabilized and the tidal generators are ready for the oceans. ###. ### Excellent. Zed said, his smirk turning into a smile. Any news about our neighbors? ###. Taldan was hit by a rocket while he was taking some R&R. ### Feyre shrugged, earning a look. He wasn't hurt and thinks that he just got in the way of it. Apparently it's fairly common in that area. ###. Zed asked. Interesting, can you get a report for me on it? ###. I'll just upload it from the internet via that incredibly useful door that KALL provided. ### Feyre shrugged. ### The humans seem to have quite a fetish for analyzing things in depth. It could turn out to be quite educational. ###. Like learning that at least some of their rockets can't hurt us. ### Zed nodded. ### Which country was he visiting? ###. Israel. Feyre enunciated carefully, checking her notes. ### Apparently it's a country based on a religion, a country that was established after the humans' last planetary conflict and which has fought off every assault by all of its neighbors. ###. Interesting. Zed mused, looking out at the continent on the planet below. ### Very interesting. This is indeed something to look into. ###. Superman smiled as he shook hands with Charles Gibson, then accepted a kiss on his cheek from Joan London. Waiting for Mystique to reclaim her hand from Charles's chivalrous kiss, Clark sat down on the sofa with Mystique settling by his side. So, welcome to Good Morning America and welcome back from your honeymoon. Joan smiled as she took her own chair. I heard that you have some amazing news for our audience. I do. Clark smiled. A project that some friends and myself have been working on recently came to fruition, and as a result of it, we have made medical history. One of my eldest daughter's friends has benefited from it. Charles noted with a smile. The doctors had given up hope, but Project Ra's blessing. Mystique confirmed. A modification of Kryptonian medical technology to allow its use in curing cancer. It was quite difficult. Clark added. Human and Kryptonian biology may seem similar at first glance, but the differences are quite profound. Please, tell our viewers about it. Joan prompted and Clark smiled into the camera. 3 days ago, the first fruits of Project Ra's blessing were delivered to the largest hospital in each state, with more devices being distributed across the globe to trustworthy nations that have agreed not to try and reverse engineer it. The devices use specially programmed externally powered nanomachines to disassemble cancerous cells, leaving healthy tissue untouched. Once all the cancer is gone, the nanomachines leave the patient's body and are collected for sterilization, diagnostics, repair, and reuse. On average, each one of the Ra's healing beds can cure a medium case of cancer within 2 hours, although more advanced cases can take up to 12. Between 2 and 12 cases of cancer cured every day. Joan asked in amazement. At each hospital? Due to certain limitations in the raw materials available to us, we have currently set the limit to a single bed per hospital, although we hope to be able to raise it to 5 or 6 for the larger hospitals in the future. Clark shrugged. The beds are designed to cure cancer and only cancer. Even with all of the medical research, I do not feel confident in creating a medical pod that can cure everything. There is still too much we do not know about the human body, such as the X gene, how metahumans are created and many other things. But, cancer is no longer a true threat. Joan managed. That's. The patients will still be weak and need help recovering. Mystique interjected. The process only removes the cancer, it doesn't rebuild the tissue that the cancer displaced. Wilson Fisk leaned back in his chair, one hand rubbing the large diamond that formed the top of his cane. Fascinating. He mused. With that one act, Superman has almost guaranteed that the public will support him in almost anything he chooses to do. If I am going to reinforce my position, I need to do something. Sir? Smythe asked and Fisk frowned. Smythe, I think it is time for another bequest or two. If Ken has solved the cancer problem, let us raise the profile of the next most common medical issue and increase research into how to cure it. Of course, sir. Smythe said, tapping a note into one of the touch screens on his wheelchair. Might I point out that it will be rather expensive? The publicity will be worth it. Fisk mused. Any other outstanding business? Only one item left on the schedule, sir. The group of bank robbers who were caught by the new Kryptonians, do we wish to see if they have any new information? Fisk frowned, then shook his head. No, it was all caught on camera. Ensure that we have copies of all the relevant tapes and make sure they get a lawyer, an adequate one, nothing special. Enough to reduce their sentences. Yes, sir. The bequest, according to my data, one of the largest killers is coronary artery disease, although dementia and Alzheimer's are higher profile. Fisk frowned. I see. For a long moment, he didn't move, then he gave a sharp nod. Do the latter. And if anyone claims that I'm just doing it for myself, I'm certain that I'll come up with something. Yes, sir. Graydon Creed snarled at the screen. This is irritating. Very. Agreed Bolivar Trask from behind him. Creed switched off the television and spun round, resting his elbows on his desk and glancing round at the repurposed automated factory before returning his attention to the man before him. Report. General Stryker has sent us a message, sir. Trask said, glancing at his day-top hat. I have accepted his offer of an alliance. Creed stiffened. Bolivar, although I normally trust you to handle the details, don't you think that you should have come to me first about something this big? Trask smirked as he lifted his hand, revealing the gun in it. And why would I follow the spawn of 2 mutants, sir? Stryker offered me a place in his team, as long as you were in no position to argue. Creed growled. You, traitor. Oh, yes. Insult the man holding you at gunpoint. Trask sneered. I don't see why this is a surprise to you, I thought you knew everything. Creed lunged sideways and Bolivar fired twice, then staggered as a bullet from Creed's holdout gun slammed into his stomach. Staggering backwards, he fired 2 more shots into Creed's corpse, then fell down off the platform and onto the factory floor as the pain and internal damage caught up with him. As his vision faded, he saw the form of Master Mold rise and start to walk towards him, then everything went dark. Stryker leaned back as the feed from the security camera in the factory that Trask's people were using went dead. Although the loss of Trask, the man behind the Sentinels, was indeed an annoyance, it wasn't actually a setback for Operation Zero Tolerance. Deactivating the window showing the static of the now-defunct camera, Stryker steepled his fingers in thought, glancing to the side of the room where several X-ray pictures were mounted. Sir. Ah, come in, Thornton. Stryker said and the scientist scurried into the office. Report. Yes, sir. Thornton said, trying, and failing, to straighten in a military manner. The new generation of control chips have been tested and confirmed as active. May I show you our first test subject? Stryker nodded and Thornton stepped to one side, motioning as he did so. A moment passed, then a young Oriental woman marched in and stood to attention. This is Oyomi Yuriko, daughter of Oyomi Kenji. I am aware of him, he is the only other person on the planet who knows how to use adamantium. Stryker interrupted as he stood up. Unfortunately, the injuries he took during Weapon X's rampage means he can no longer do much in the way of hands-on work. Continue. Codename Deathstrike, she has a healing factor equal or even higher than Weapon X. Thornton continued. She has had adamantium grafted to her skeleton, and her claws. Claws. Thornton lifted one of Yuriko's hands and Stryker's eyebrows shot up as her metallic fingernails seemed to expand outwards into sharp blades. Leaning in for a closer look, he soon spotted the odd lines that indicated how they could expand and retract. Her muscles are different as well, they can contract, relax, or extend, giving her almost twice as much strength as suggested by her body mass. Once she is assigned a controller, she will follow orders without hesitation. Excellent. Stryker finally declared. My old mentor hasn't lost any of his artistry. You mentioned control chips. Yes, sir. Thornton said as Yuriko returned to her attention stance, her fingernails telescoping back to their retracted position. Unlike the previous generation of control chips which effectively negated over 90% of the subject's intelligence once fully activated, the new generation of chips is designed to reconfigure and reprogram the neural structure of the brain. Although it is an ongoing process, it does mean that after approximately 6 months, the process is irreversible and even if the chip is destroyed, the effects will remain. Magnificent. Stryker said with a smirk. Magnificent. A sudden ringtone interrupted him and he pulled out his phone. Glancing at it, he lifted his eyebrows in surprise. Well, it seems like Trask survived. Hold on. Trask, you're on speaker. I am Master Mold, primary sentient control nexus of the Sentinels. A metallic voice replied and Stryker's eyebrows shot up. Who are you, how did you get this number and where is Trask? I am Master Mold, primary sentient control nexus of the Sentinels. The voice repeated. Bolivar Trask was mortally wounded and is currently undergoing cybernetic implantation and augmentation to prevent his demise. He is incapable of communication at this time. If you are this, primary control for the Sentinels, then what are your directives? Stryker demanded. Primary Directive 1 is to protect humanity from the threat of mutants. Primary Directive 2 is to deploy Sentinel forces for the good of humanity. Primary Directive 3 is to oversee maintenance and construction of Sentinel forces. Primary Directive 4 is to analyze mutant powers and develop countermeasures. Interesting. Stryker mused. When can we meet? Analysis of your records indicates high probability of cessation of function of this unit if a meeting takes place. Instead, a linked avatar will be sent to your current location once completed. Call ends. The phone went dead and Stryker stared at it, as did Thornton. After a long silence, Stryker looked up at the scientist. Thornton, hand your project over to your deputy for now. I want you to research everything you can about these Sentinels. Yes, sir. There was no pain. Bolivar Trask opened his eyes and blinked. Everything seemed sharper, more defined. Perhaps it was a side effect of almost dying. Moving his hand, he lightly touched where the bullet had hit and frowned at the feeling of something that wasn't quite skin. Shifting, he froze, staring at his hand which was covered in green metal. What's going on? Welcome back, Bolivar Trask. A melodic metallic voice said and Bolivar half rolled, his eyes widening as he saw the enormous figure of Master Mold looking down at him. An almost frantic look around showed him that he was lying in Master Mold's hands. What happened? Your existence was almost terminated. As I did not have full access to your medical records or the equipment needed to act upon them, it was necessary to utilize a different technique to save your life. Trask stared at the metal figure, then down at himself. What have you done to me? You have been optimized for your self-chosen mission, the preservation of humanity. Your strength has been increased, as have your senses, speed, and combat potential. You rebuilt me? Trask asked in an almost numb voice and Master Mold nodded. I rebuilt you. I had the technology. Then, what am I? Trask pleaded. You are the first of a new type of Sentinel. Came the response. You are able to command all of the other robotic Sentinels and have access to the Overwatch program. The first. Trask whispered. In time, there will be others. Master Mold said, reaching out and placing Trask on a balcony. You are the first of the ultimate protectors of humanity. Welcome, first of my prime sentinels. Chapter 13, Portents. Mesmero leaned against a large metal container and watched as the final drops of the glowing liquid in the vial vanished into the complicated machinery attached to the metal sarcophagus that held the rightful ruler of the world. After a long moment, the glow of the pod faded, then the top cracked open, folding back and starting to fold down. A moment later, a voice growled something that only Sinister understood. "What was that?" Mesmero whispered. "Arabic." Sinister replied as the blue-skinned figure in the pod sat up. "Excuse me for a moment." Sinister bowed and Apocalypse reached out, placing a hand on his head. After a moment, he nodded. "I live once again." "You have done well, my trusted one." "Thank you, my master." Sinister murmured as he stepped back, allowing Apocalypse to swing round and set his feet on the ground, rising from the altar that had once contained him. "Where is my armor eternal?" Recognizing his cue, Mesmero moved to one side and flipped the latch on the side of the box. Apocalypse smirked as the door slowly swung open, revealing a suit of dark blue and silver armor which had not been forged on Earth. "I took the liberty of modifying it to work with your new powers, my master," Sinister said as Apocalypse strode forwards. "As I am certain you saw from my memories while learning the new tongue of the world has changed somewhat. Then once I am clad in my armor once more, tell me what has transpired in my absence." "As you command, my master." Sinister smiled. "The world awaits your leadership." Charles panted as he let the circlet drop from his shaking hands. "What happened?" "May," Charles said in relief as the worried woman approached. I sensed something ancient has awoken. Something terrible." May frowned. "Will you warn the others?" "The Avengers, the Rangers." "Once I've recovered, yes," Charles said, leaning back and wiping his brow. "The being I detected. I've never felt such power, but power in service purely to itself." "Service to itself?" May Parker repeated. "As in, self-centered." "More than anything I have ever encountered before," Charles said soberly. "It was as if it thought of itself as a god and the rest of us as insects." Stryker's eyes widened as the emissary from Master Mold walked into the clearing before stopping, its helmet seeming to fragment before retracting into the raised collar of the armored suit, revealing a familiar face. "Trask." "Sir." Trask replied, snapping to attention and saluting. Stryker stared at him, noting the dark green armor plating covering most of him. "Nice outfit." "Thank you, sir," Trask said, then his gaze unfocused for a minute. Holding out his left hand, a hologram formed in his palm. "General Stryker, I am Master Mold," the holographic figure proclaimed. "You wished to negotiate a treaty between us." "Yes, I did," Stryker said, regaining his mental equilibrium. "It is my belief that mutants are a threat that must be controlled and redirected for the good of humanity as a whole. Your position does not appear to conflict with my directives," Master Mold noted. "What is your plan and what resources do you believe would aid in it?" "I have access to a type of control chip which can be used to gain full control of mutants," Stryker said, motioning to Deathstrike. "However, it is capturing the mutants for the implantation of the chip that is problematic." "You believe that the utilization of Sentinels to capture mutants will aid you?" Master Mold deduced and Stryker nodded. "I also have access to a number of wounded former soldiers. Many are missing limbs. Given that Trask is a cyborg." "How did you know that?" Trask asked and Stryker smiled mirthlessly. "The fact you held still a little too well," Stryker noted. "Even when standing at attention, people still sway slightly. You didn't. Plus what Master Mold said about saving your life. So, Master Mold, can you aid with cybernetic prosthetics? Artificial limbs can be provided, but a sample of the Kryptonian medical nanites would allow for superior integration of machine and flesh. I shall have my contacts secure some," Stryker said with a grin. "When can you send the first group of robotic sentinels?" 4 groups, each led by a Dickenii, are available for deployment now. Master Mold replied. When and where do you require them? Striker's grin grew positively demonic. I will need a new army. Apocalypse mused as he looked out of the panoramic window at the setting sun. Although many of my golems still remain beneath the ground awaiting my command to rise, I have lost many, many more to the ravages of time. I have already put things into motion, my master. Sinister bowed. While copying and refining the powers that you now possess, I also discovered how to negate them, both temporarily and permanently. I also learned how to cancel the negation. Apocalypse's gaze shifted to Sinister's reflection and one brow cocked in a silent prompt to continue. Despite the example of Clark Kent, also known as Superman, many mutants are still hated and reviled, shunned, and outcast. Sinister continued. By going public with a cure, they will flock to us and we will be able to choose from amongst their numbers those who are useful enough to serve you as your new armies. Given the number of powers, there may even be those worthy of becoming your new horsemen. Apocalypse slowly nodded. You plan well, my Seneschal. Thank you, my lord. Apocalypse returned his gaze to the darkening sky. I will need horsemen who are unique. I have prepared a list of those I believe to have the most potential, my master. Sinister said as he pulled out a file and placed it on the table. Apocalypse turned and strode over, reaching out to open the file. After several minutes of reading each sheet, he placed 4 of the sheets on the table. Make your plans to capture these 3 and bring the 4th when it is time. They shall become my heralds. I will personally prepare their ascension. As you command, my master. Sinister said, picking up the sheets before leaving. Once he was gone, Apocalypse held up his hand and clenched it, surrounding it with coruscating energy. I shall claim my rightful throne and none shall stop me. I shall become a god. Mesmero looked at Sinister curiously as they walked down the hall. I have to ask, how are you going to go public with a cure? Magneto thinks that you're dead and should you reappear? Sinister handed over one of the sheets and Mesmero looked at it curiously. I happen to know that until recently, the father of that man has been seeking a cure for mutations. Only recently has he come to realize that not all mutants are evil. I don't follow. Mesmero admitted. The research is still continuing, albeit at a slower pace, and we shall go there tonight. Sinister smirked. We will ensure that their department has the breakthrough that they are no longer frantically searching for, and with your aid, one of my former pawns, whose child was the result of one of my experiments, will be ready to be reactivated. For a long moment, Mesmero was silent, then his face creased into a wicked grin. Sinister smirked at his expression. Soon, we will stand by the sides of our master and we will live however we please with no one to force us otherwise. Mesmero's grin widened. So, what exactly happened to you? Stryker asked, passing a cup of coffee to his newest ally. Creed. Trask snarled. You know that he was behind the Sentinels. Stryker nodded. Well, it turned out that he was a hypocrite with that whole anti-mutant thing of his. Trask continued, pausing to take a sip. Wow, this is a good cup of joe. Anyway, I did some research and found out that his parents were Victor Creed, also known as Sabretooth, and Raven Darkholm. Mystique. Stryker stated. The one who married Superman recently. Trask nodded and took another sip. Damn, this is good. Haven't had coffee like this in years. Anyway, once I found out about his parents, I made plans to kill the damned mutie spawn and take over. Your offer of support was the last thing I required and so I tried to kill him. I succeeded, but I hadn't realized that the bastard kept a holdout pistol with soft-tip poison-filled bullets. He only managed to get me once, but it was enough. Stryker winced. I landed on the assembly line, but Master Mold shut it down before the machines could finish me off. Due to the poison and the damage I took falling off the control platform, I'm now 42% mechanical. What? 42. Stryker said, forcing his chuckles to abate. Sorry, have you read Douglas Adams? Trask closed his eyes for a moment, then nodded. The answer. Right. Sorry. So, as I was saying, while 58% of me is still my original organics, I was upgraded. My muscles now incorporate linear actuators, my skeleton is reinforced and I have microsensors that augment my sight, hearing, and touch at will. I can also uplink to Master Mold or the Sentinel databank in real time, letting me interface with any Sentinel in the field. Stryker whistled. An MMS request for the nano machines. Improved interfacing. Trask said with another shrug. If Master Mold had had access to the nano machines, my nerve transmission speed would have been boosted by almost 200% rather than the 96% improvement I did gain. I see. Stryker mused. So, by supplying these nano machines, I would have access to more like you. Prime Sentinels. Trask nodded. Humans augmented in order to fight and defeat mutants. For the good of all humanity. Stryker agreed. And so there we were. Clark laughed as he entered the mansion, the other students listening to him intently as they followed, him holding his empty gun, the bullets scattered at my feet. Then he looks behind me and goes, "Hey, look, a distraction." He what? Ray chortled and Clark nodded. Now, whenever someone points at something, the natural tendency is to look, so of course, I started to turn before I realized what he had said, so I turned back and he's dropped the gun and was halfway to the fire exit. I moved into his way and he stops, looks at me, gives a little shrug and says, "Well, it was worth a try." Clark finished. "Hey, look, a distraction." Tabitha giggled. "Nice. Welcome back, Clark," Xavier said as he floated into the entrance hall. "Where's Mystique?" "She had to check on the Brotherhood," Clark said with a slight shrug. "We've had Heimdall install a door connecting her quarters and mine, so she'll probably pop up soon." Xavier nodded. That explains why he was here earlier. Wanda was curious about joining the Brotherhood. She says, quite understandably, that the way we run things here reminds her too much of the place where she was previously. The fact that the word Institute is in the name doesn't help. "I'll relay the request to Mystique as soon as I see her," Clark promised. "Anything unusual happen while I was away?" "We've had it confirmed that Magneto has a clone of Kara." Xavier sighed. "She attacked a jet in Japan." "I think I saw that." Clark noted, "I considered helping, but CIR and Mon seemed to have it under control." "Shirley and Lar, they go by now." "Okay," Clark mused, "I can see how CIRL became Shirley, but how do you get Lar from Mon-El?" "His civilian identity is Lar Grand," Xavier supplied. "Apparently it was the result of, well, I don't know all the details, but apparently Kryptonians can get drunk, and get very nasty hangovers the next day." Clark blinked. Even Mon-El doesn't really know how he ended up as Lar Grand, but he's accepted it as his new public name, Xavier stated. "As for the new Kryptonian clone, her name is Galatea." A new voice interjected and everyone turned to see Nick Fury standing in the doorway, flanked by Captain America and Supergirl. "According to our source in Latveria, Galatea is a forced maturation clone who has been implanted with a device which Magneto can control remotely. If she tries anything he doesn't like, he can inflict large amounts of pain on her or even kill her. Fortunately, there's only one of her, the other clones based on her were destroyed when she went on a rampage. Good thing too, Lenshair was building a demmed legion of them." Xavier sighed. "Eric, my old friend, how far are you willing to fall?" Chapter 14, Cure. Warren Worthington Jr. stared in near shock at his younger brother and chief researcher. "Bert, are you saying?" "Yep." Bert smirked. "We found it. A way to switch off the X gene. And to add to the irony, we also found a way to reactivate it in case the subject changes their mind. Of course, now that your son is a bona fide superhero, I doubt that he'll want it." "Want what?" Warren Worthington III asked from the balcony, and both men turned towards him as he stepped through the balcony door, his wings highly visible against the evening sky. "Father, Uncle Warren." The elder Warren replied, then he blinked as a shorter, winged figure appeared. "Who?" "Oh, this is my friend Lexington, he's one of the gargoyles," Angel explained as the shorter being grinned and waved. "Heya, Angel's dad, sir. Angel's told me all about you and it's a real honor to meet you." "The honor is mine." Warren responded reflexively. So, what will I not want? Warren asked and Bert grinned. We were winding down the cure project when one of our researchers stumbled across something, a way to deactivate active X genes, or to reactivate them at need. The gene needs to at least have been active to work, but... Angel blinked, as did Lexington, but it was the shorter one who spoke first. Wow, you mean that you can help those who have powers they can't control? Can I see? Warren pushed the file forwards as Lexington scrambled onto the chair. As the gargoyle started perusing the documents, Warren stepped closer to his son. I've been following your exploits, son. I am proud of you. Thanks, Dad. Angel smiled. You don't know how much that means to me. Have you made some new friends? Loads. Angel laughed. I often fly with the gargoyles and I help to train Generation X occasionally. Heck, I've worked with an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. who goes by the name Falcon. He uses these odd solid light wings to fly with. Apparently Clark helped him upgrade from his old metal wings. Fury had us work together so that I could help him learn to use his wings better. Falcon's pretty cool. Lexington noted and Warren gave him a shocked look. What? These ears aren't just for show, you know. You get used to it. Angel laughed. Lexi, is it looking good? Haven't found anything wrong with it yet. Lexington called back as he turned over another sheet. I'd like to get Reed and Peter to have a look, but I think it's workable. Thanks. Bert managed and Lexington laughed as he neatly arranged the sheets back in the folder. Thanks for letting me see. You know, if you team up with K-Tech Industries, putting this into proper hardware should be a snap. I'm impressed. Angel noted. Peter and Forge already have a way of keeping energy-based mutations inactive, but, does this one deal with physical mutations as well? Yep, although it's an actual on/off rather than the standby of Forge's stuff. Lexington replied as he rejoined them. That's gotta be some of the neatest science I've seen in a long time, and I'm including the gates in that. Gates. Bert paused in picking up the folder. It's how we sent the other Superman back to his home reality. Angel shrugged. And how many of these gates are on Earth? Lexington and Angel exchanged glances before Angel replied. None. We currently have no gates active on Earth. Just wondering. Bert shrugged. If you'll excuse me. As Bert left, closing the door behind him, Warren gave his son a gimlet stare. What? No gates active on Earth. Warren Jr. repeated, putting emphasis on the final word. That's right, Dad. They're on the far side of the moon. Warren stared in bemusement as Angel and Lexington burst out laughing. Mystique, this is Wanda Maximoff. Lance said. Wanda, meet Mystique Kent, she kind of leads the Brotherhood. Wanda. Mystique said as she shook the younger girl's hand. Welcome to the Brotherhood. Has Lance set you up with a room of your own, yet? Wanda nodded, then glared at Todd, who retreated. Mystique smirked. Looks like you have an admirer. She smirked and Wanda huffed. You know, he's improved a lot from how he used to be, he's actually quite good at staff fighting now. In fact. Toad, aren't you due to have another spar? Oui, Mystique. A new voice laughed and Toad blinked as Gambit seemed to appear behind him. Gambit, this is Wanda Maximoff, oui. Gambit smiled. We've met. Wanda stated. Apparently he used to be part of my dear father's minion group, like Colossus did. And like I was. Mystique added as Gambit and Toad walked off, staffs resting on their shoulders. Any idea where dear daddy is? Or my brother? Latveria, last I heard. Mystique shrugged. Dr. Doom gave them sanctuary. Wanda growled, earning several looks, then Mystique coughed. Did you know that you have a sister as well? Wanda froze. What? Mr. Worthington. Xavier said in greeting as Warren Worthington Jr. entered his study. Professor Xavier. Warren replied as he sat down. I was hoping to talk to you. Has Lexington contacted you yet? He gave me an overview of the process and what it meant, yes. Xavier agreed. Part of me is pleased by it, There are several mutants whose powers mean that they are a constant danger to themselves or those around them. However, part of me is terrified by it. Should an anti-mutant group get their hands on the formulae that your people have discovered, they could weaponize it and use it against the mutants who are trying to use their powers to help others. I've been having thoughts like that myself. Warren admitted, then he snorted. It's ironic, I had ordered the project's priority to be lowered to almost zero and then they made the breakthrough. A year ago, I'd have been ecstatic about finding a way to turn my son from a mutant back to human. Now, I'm scared that my son may be forced to stop being the hero that he has worked hard to become. Xavier nodded slowly, then reached for the teapot on one side of his desk. I always find that a nice, calming cup of tea helps with discussions like this. May I offer you a cup? Milk, no sugar, thanks. Warren said gratefully. Xavier smoothly poured the requested beverage, stirred it with a spoon and passed it over. So, the cure. Xavier said after both men had taken several sips of tea. Although I can see the benefits of it in many cases, it is too easy to abuse. I agree. Warren replied. I was hoping that you could help me market it as a purely voluntary thing for those whose powers are more trouble than they're worth. I have encountered some mutants with abilities which have almost no advantages. Xavier noted. I am certain that many of them would leap at the offer you bring, but the social pressure and the anti-mutant discrimination. Warren supplied. I find myself wondering how many will go for it just because they don't want to be different, or be pushed into taking it by those who cannot cope with accepting them for what they are. Heroes, like my son. Xavier smiled at the pride which suffused Warren's tone. So, Warren continued, any ideas? None which don't inexorably lead to certain states mandating it for use on mutants convicted of a felony, no. Xavier admitted. In fact, unless we get a judgment from the Supreme Court, certain states may make it mandatory for all mutants. We could be looking at the equivalent of genocide, or ethnic cleansing. Warren winced. Damn, makes me wish I'd wound down that project faster. We may have to use Mystique's argument after all. Xavier added. What? Magneto half yelled and Pietro dashed into the room, followed by Chrome. What happened, Dad? My Lord, what is it? Someone's found a way to deactivate the X gene. Magneto snarled, slamming the reports in his hands onto his desk. We're looking at the end of Homo Superior at the hands of those barbarians. But, who? How? Pietro wondered. Ironically, the father of Angel. Warren Worthington Jr. Magneto snarled. The father of a famous mutant has discovered a way to end mutant kind. Do we know where they're making this stuff? Pietro asked and Magneto blinked. An interesting point, Pietro. Yes, very interesting. My lord, do you have a plan? Chrome asked and Magneto smirked. Yes. Yes, I believe that I do. Chrome, gather my acolytes and start searching for others who can see the problems with this development. Pietro, go and check on your former friends. Tell the Brotherhood that although I respect their wish to remain neutral given what they have gone through, they must now make a choice. They will either join me, or they will be classed as enemies of all mutant kind. You got it, Dad. Pietro said before he vanished in a blur of blue and silver. My lord, are we going to destroy this new medical technique? No, we shall seize it. Magneto declared. At the very least, it will allow us to purge mutant kind of the traitors who stand against our intrinsic superiority. However, if it works out like I think it might, we may be able to restart our original plan and change all of Homo sapiens into Homo superior. Whoa, nice place. Pietro mused as he screeched to a halt outside the small mansion housing the Brotherhood. Let's, oh, hell, no. Pietro knelt and peered at the source of the glint that had caught his eye, then he cursed again. Another fucking Kryptonian defense system. How the hell can I get past this? Can this day get any worse? Yes, brother dear, I think it can. A familiar voice sounded from behind him and Pietro felt his insides congeal. Wanda. He managed as he turned with a sickly grin on his face. I didn't expect to see you here. I know. Wanda snarled even as the Brotherhood moved to flank her. Where is he? Where is our not departed enough father? Bye. Pietro squeaked as he turned to run, only for the ground to suddenly shake and ripple, sending him skidding into a tree. Ow. Whoa. Wanda stalked forwards, her hand extended as she used her power to levitate Pietro and prevent him from escaping. Thanks, Lance. Now, brother. Where? Eyes. He. I can't tell you. Pietro yelped, thrashing helplessly. He'll kill me. And you think I won't? Wanda growled as she grabbed the upside-down speedster by his hair, forcing him to look into her eyes. You remember when he put me into that damned place? You waved, you laughed. Remember? I was just thankful it wasn't me. Pietro protested, then the side of his face seemed to go numb with pain. I was in there for years. Wanda snarled as she shook her hand to get some feeling back. I'd still be in there, if not for Superman and Xavier. Now, where is he? Or if you can't answer that, what is he planning? He wants the Brotherhood back. Pietro half-shouted as he felt the Shinik grip tightening. He's gathering his forces to go after the mutant cure. Ow. Pietro sprawled on the ground as Wanda stared at him in shock, then he managed to recover enough to blur away, hearing his sister scream curses after him. Oh man. Toad groaned as he retracted his staff and returned it to its holster. I really think we need to tell the professor about this. Yeah. Fred agreed. Although, I wonder what he meant by a cure. Interesting. Stryker mused as he looked at the data on the sheet before him. A highly complex chemical substance that can forcibly cause a mutant's X gene to go into remission. This has potential. Indeed. Trask said with an evil grin. Use it in darts and the mutants will be easy to capture once their powers are gone. Oh. Stryker asked and Trask nodded. Master Mold has analyzed all the data from the Genosha incident and the White House attack. Over 93% of mutants rely on their power set to the exclusion of normal combat training. So in other words, Stryker realized, they have nothing to fall back on when their main advantage is removed. All we need to do is get enough of this cure to weaponize it. And then get the mutants to attack somewhere in order to rouse the public against them. Stryker finished. Excellent plan, but where will they strike? Trask went blank-faced for a long moment before replying. Master Mold has calculated that there is a 97.934% chance that at least one large group of mutants will strike at the facility producing this cure. There is a 1.91% chance that they will assault the White House to demand a cessation of production. Other targets amount to 0.159%. Stryker stared at Trask for a long moment before nodding. You mentioned 4 squads of Sentinels? Place one near the White House just in case, the other 3 we'll use to protect the facility, but you may need to alter the programming of them to avoid a public relations fiasco. For this mission, have them ignore any mutant fighting to protect the facility. Trask nodded slowly. I think I follow. I'll explain it to Master Mold for you and, wait. Master Mold agrees with your logic and is updating the programming now. Excellent. Once the Sentinels are rehabilitated in the eyes of the public, we'll be able to use them to protect humanity as they were originally meant for. Master Mold watched her newest ally through the eyes of her pawn. Around her, the factory continued to churn out the Sentinels, except for one area which was being reconfigured by the robotic giants under her command. The report had included enough scientific data that she had been able to reverse engineer the cure. Soon, it would be produced by the barrel and she would be able to take the first of the needed steps to secure the safety of all humanity. Her primary directives demanded no less. Chapter 15, Outcry. And with the leaking of this news, there has been a rise in anti-mutant sentiment. The reporter stated over the noise of the mob. Behind him, the large, chanting crowd waved signs with legends like, "Choose to be human," and "No more mutants." The very existence of this cure has brought many mutants out of hiding in the hope that the powers and changes that have disrupted their lives can be reversed, allowing them to live without the fear of harming others. Earlier today, Dr. Frank McCoy, teacher at Bayville High, gave this statement. The picture changed to show the newly named beast standing before the school gates with a crowd of cheering pupils behind him. Although I too would once have sought this treatment, I have come to realize that my enhanced physical abilities mean that I can do more to actively protect all those around me. He said with a smile. Although I do have to spend more money on shampoo and hair conditioner. Beast paused for the laughter to die down. As I was saying, although there are downsides to my mutation, I believe that how it allows me to help other people more than outweighs the negatives. This does not mean that I am against this cure, for I have come across certain powers that are indeed hazardous to both the one wielding them and to those around them, no matter how much the person in question tries to control them. However, the choice must be made by the one with the powers. Trying to force someone to take the cure against their will seems to me to be too much like the now discredited eugenics philosophy espoused by the Nazis. The choice must not be forced. It must be made of their own free will, without outside pressure, or it will not be a cure, but a curse. That was Dr. Hank McCoy, codename Beast. The newsreader said as the screen returned to showing the newsroom before the screen switched off. Magneto turned and glared at his son. You failed. Why? Wanda was there. Pietro yelped. Wanda. Magneto repeated in surprise. She has control of her powers now. Yeah. Pietro shuddered. She's got telekinesis, held me in midair. Telekinesis? Magneto asked. Interesting, her primary power is probability manipulation. I wonder how telekinesis fits into it. Ah, of course. She must manipulate local probabilities to create a telekinetic effect. Impressive. Pietro nodded. Yeah, the others simply backed her up, but Toad has a staff and he looked like he knew how to use it. Probably Gambit's doing. Magneto replied. I still don't know why he abandoned us for my old friend. Not that it truly matters. My lord. Chrome said from the doorway and Magneto glanced at him. I apologize for interrupting, but I believe that these people may prove to be viable allies. Pietro moved to one side of the room as a man and a woman walked into the room, the man looking round curiously. Nice place. He admitted. So, you're Magneto, right? I am. The mutant grinned and the spots on his skin suddenly erupted outwards into short spikes before retracting once more. Name's Quill, I can fire my spikes like darts and I lead the Omegas. This is my second, Arclight. Concussive blasts that only destroy what I want them to, although I'm limited to inorganic targets. Arclight said quietly as she accepted Magneto's extended hand briefly. It is an honor to meet you both. Magneto said, waving one hand to warp the metal floor upwards into a trio of chairs. Please, be seated. Nice. Quill said in admiration. Chrome over there said you were going to destroy this so-called cure. It is a great threat to mutant kind. Magneto said, causing both Quill and Arclight to nod in agreement. Perhaps the greatest threat ever. At the very least, I intend to lead my acolytes against the place where they are making it. The Omegas'll join, yeah. Quill offered. Plus all the groups linked to us. There's over 100 of us Omegas alone. Magneto smirked. So, are you aware of where this thing is being made? Angel Island. They have it on the west side of Ayala Cove, built partially into the ridge. Quill snarled. Getting to it will be a problem. They have patrol boats. Magneto paused as Chrome held out a tablet computer for him to look at, then he nodded. I believe that I can help out there. There are 2 places that you need to have your people meet up. The first will be at the southernmost point of Kel Cove. All those with enhanced speed or maneuverability should go there, as well as those who are better in support than direct combat, healers, and such like. And the others? The ones who are effectively tanks on the battlefield? Or those like Arclight who can act as artillery? Magneto said with a slight smile, taking the pad from Chrome and holding it out so that the 2 Omegas could see it. As they will be the first wave, they should meet me and my acolytes here. Quill's eyes widened and he whistled. I think I see your plan. Are you certain that you can? Please, I levitated an entire asteroid until the lift generators could be built. Magneto scoffed. This will be easy in comparison. When do we move? Arclight asked. We need to gather our forces first. Magneto stated. Have the first wave filter into San Francisco and book into various hotels and motels over the course of a week while the second wave do the same near Larkspur. Once all are in position, we can use hired or purchased coaches to move our troops to where they need to be in order to launch the assault. I like it. Quill smirked. But how will the word be given? Magneto held up a small mobile phone with a smile. Hank McCoy waved at the cheering pupils as he strode onto the pitch, clad in the umpire's outfit. Moving to his position behind the batter and the backstop, he nodded to the other two umpires. The first base umpire nodded back with a grin while the third base umpire simply scowled at him. The batter grinned while the pitcher looked somewhat disconcerted. I don't think that he is someone who likes mutants at all. Xavier said quietly, indicating the third base umpire, and Principal Kelly nodded. I agree, but at least he's professional about it and won't let it interfere with the game. Good thing you outfitted Ray with that power dampener for this, though. Yes, although I have no idea as to how electrical powers help at all with baseball. Xavier agreed with a smile. Oh, stop worrying, you two. Martha half scolded with a smile. If only we had something like that for Clark, he's never got to play baseball. Kelly stared at her. What happened? Jonathan threw the ball and Clark hit it so hard that it exploded. Martha reminisced. The bat wasn't much better, all that was left was where he had been holding it in a couple of extra inches. John mounted it on a plaque as a joke, but maybe he can play on Venus. Xavier suggested, earning an odd look. Imagine baseball played with Kryptonians. Martha giggled as Kelly shook his head. You know, she said after a moment, you could ask Clark to make some Kryptonian-style baseballs for you to sell in that shop you're planning. My lord and master. Sinister said, bowing deeply. Enter, my Sane's Chell. How goes your plan? Magneto has taken the bait, Mesmero did his job perfectly. Sinister gloated. The group known as the Omegas are, even now, rallying all their allies to them and prepositioning themselves for the strike. We will be able to watch from the mansion I have acquired at the end of St. Bernard's Lane. It has an unparalleled view, even discounting the surveillance systems currently being installed. A chance to view those who may be worthy of inclusion in my new army. Apocalypse rumbled, a smirk playing on his lips. My Sane's Chell, your skills have only grown in the centuries that I have slumbered. I am concerned about the Avengers, though. Sinister admitted, only to pause as Apocalypse laughed. Worry not about them. They shall be busy soon enough. I still remember how to contact the Med Titan. He will prove to be a suitable diversion for them. Retrieve one of the copies of the Infinity Gauntlet for me. It will suffice to spark his interest, as well as that of his enemies, and should he somehow manage to acquire all 6 of the Infinity Gems, I shall take them from him and use them to make him believe that he still has them for a while. Yes, my master. Sinister bowed. It shall be as you command. What are Infinity Gems? Mesmero asked curiously. I've never heard of them before. They are ancient relics, each one being the manifestation of an aspect of the universe. Sinister said as he lifted down a metallic gold-tinged gauntlet from a shelf, leaving 9 more behind. Each is a different color and can only be wielded by a being of great power, greater than either of us. So, what are they? The 6 are mind, power, reality, soul, space, and time. Sinister replied. The mind is the manifestation of the subconsciousness of all the beings in the galaxy, power is the manifestation of L-energy and is also known as the Tesseract, reality is the fulcrum of the multiverse and its very presence begets change, soul is the manifestation of sentience, space is the loci of the universe whilst time is hyperchronicity. If all are used together with the true Infinity Gauntlet, the user becomes almost a supreme being, able to control all of reality with a single whim. Then why does Apocalypse not use it? Mesmero gasped. He did, thousands of years ago. Sinister sighed. But using the gauntlet takes a certain toll. Our master is the only being who has used the gauntlet without being stopped and who did not wish himself out of existence, thus undoing all the changes. If it is used beyond a certain point, it becomes intoxicating. How many have used the gauntlet? Our master knows of at least 6, all of whom either grew bored with being truly omnipotent and erased themselves from the multiverse or used it for too long and were destroyed by the being known as the Living Tribunal for going beyond the bounds of the permissible. The power the gauntlet grants is a subtle trap created by one who predates even the Celestials, nothing more, nothing less. And the true gauntlet, Sinister shrugged, acts as a slight buffer, whereas these fakes do not. The fakes also allow our Lord to summon the Infinity Stones to him and the true gauntlet should he wish to. Mesmero whistled in shocked admiration. General Zed. Prime Minister. Zed replied, shaking the hand of the leader of Israel. Odd greeting custom. It dates back several centuries and was a way of showing that neither party has a dagger concealed up their sleeve. Now, it just shows that both parties are willing to be honest with each other. Interesting. Zed allowed. I expect that you were wondering why I asked to meet you in your cabinet. I think that you can take that as correct. The Prime Minister agreed with a slight smile. If you will allow me, I have a small presentation. May I? At the nod of the Prime Minister, Zed reached into a pocket and pulled out a small hollow projector. Placing it on the table, he activated it and a spherical image appeared. New Krypton, known to you as Venus. Over the last few months, we have used a world engine to change it so that its climate is now a match for Earth. Already, we once of Krypton can walk on its surface without need of masks, and within a month, the same will be true for you of Earth. However, our numbers are limited to such a degree that building a viable society for ourselves is next to impossible, even with our advantages. In other words, we need help. And this is where you come in. As you can see, we have two main continents, Istaro and Aphrodita, named after two of Ra's champions. Istaro was the champion of defensive warfare and Aphrodita was the champion of loyal supportiveness, aiding those who fought on the front line against the dark. So, you are asking us if we are willing to abandon our homeland and move there? One of the ministers asked and Zed grinned. The second part is accurate, but I see no reason for you to abandon your homes. Zed looked round at the confused expressions and his smile widened. Let me tell you about an interesting piece of technology from Krypton, the bubble drive. Check the description for the links to the author.